Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Hi, Gerald. Hi, Missy.
Hello,
Hello.
nice to see you again.
Thank you for
Likewise.
inviting me.
Likewise. So, we'll be talking about guided discovery today. And for those of you who are not very aware of what guided discovery is basically a teaching technique where educators provide examples and guide learners to discover rules and concepts themselves so that it fosters deeper understanding and retention. So it's good for active learning, it's good for critical thinking, and it's a very student-centered approach of teaching. So we're going to talk about that today. And so starting off with, I've given a very brief definition of guided discovery. So Missy, starting off with you, what do you, what can you tell us about what guided discovery is and what are the principles of guided discovery as a teaching method?
Well, as you said, Hareem, it's a very student-centered and it's a technique for clarifying language. So most teachers will know that language clarification includes meaning, pronunciation, form. Um, and oftentimes teachers have the idea that the only way to teach grammar is to lecture and to tell the students what the rules are. And this is a very useful technique for teachers who are trying to move away from that. So it's basically a technique for clarifying language in which you give the students sufficient number of examples of your language point, and then you give them questions or tasks that guide them to discover the rules. Shall I provide an example?
Of course.
So, for example, just the simple past tense. So, if there is a short story that takes place all in the past, you could first ask the students to underline all of the words that end with ed. And that's going to get them to notice that the ed words are the simple past. So the next step would be to think about meaning. Well, the simple past is a really simple concept. So we don't need a lot of work on meaning, but in terms of pronunciation and form, the simple past is not so simple. So we know that for pronunciation, we have three different possibilities for a final ed. We can say talked, robbed, or weighted. And this is something that students really struggle with. They don't know how to pronounce that final ed. So we might give them a task where they would listen and they would notice that, oh, wow, the ed sounds different in these three different examples. So we would get them first to discover there is a difference, and then we might give them a categorization task so that they could see that, oh, there's three categories. Some words go in this one, some words go in that one, and so on. So usually guided discovery involves some type of worksheet rather than I always tell my teachers that I'm training, you can see when guided discovering is happening because the teacher is monitoring the students doing a task rather than at the front of the room. So
Right.
that's basically what it is like.
So Gerald, how do we differentiate guided discovery from our traditional instructional approach?
Well, so as Missy, to elaborate on what Missy has said, you are arousing curiosity in the language and you're giving the students time to work things out for themselves. Now, this is a natural instinct. We want to know the rules. Traditionally, we would wait to be told. We'd wait to be told the rules and given them on a handout, which we may or may not read. Uh, with the guided discovery, the teacher knows the rules but doesn't say anything. provides the opportunity in the class for the students to find out the rules for themselves, and in so doing, they stand more of a chance of actually retaining the information that they pick up because they put this work in. In a sense, finding the rules is a reward for work that they do in the class or outside of the class, doesn't matter. Kind of research helped by the teacher. And this, if it works, and motivation is a key thing here, is a very successful way or alternative to the traditional way of teaching.
And why is that, Missy? What exactly do you think are the benefits of moving towards guided discovery? Because from the looks of it, and I know firsthand that designing a guided discovery task is a lot of work on teachers' part. So what is it that she's going to get out of all that hard work pre-class?
That's a good question. We certainly don't need more work for teachers. Thankfully, the more current course books are putting the tasks in the book. So sometimes teachers don't recognize them as guided discovery tasks. So the task is there, it's right in the book, something like, circle something in the sentences above. What do you notice about blah, blah, blah. So the course books have given underlining, circling, those kinds of tasks, or filling in the blanks to discover. The thing in that situation, the teachers need to recognize that it's guided discovery and not what I call taking that to the board and sort of talking the students through it. So first step is they need to recognize it. It's quite difficult to design an effective guided discovery task. So for new teachers, this would be daunting. So depending on course book materials is a good thing. In the teacher training courses like the CELTA, we do train the teachers on how to take a set of rules and sort of take some of the information away, white it out, for example, and then have the students fill it by looking at a set of examples of the target language. Now, the thing that I like the most about guided discovery, twofold. For teachers are always trying to reduce their teacher talk time because we keep telling them to do that. And then they're frustrated because they don't know how to do that, how to teach grammar without the lecture base. So it gives them a tool to use to reduce teacher talk time. For learners, it's really great because it allows them, it's like learner training. They become independent learners. And I get excited about this because I study a bit of French and Spanish, and I know and love guided discovery so much. I use it when I'm trying to learn another language. So I look for patterns in the language. I may not know what they mean, but I notice, for example, the Spanish, I notice why there's so many verbs that end with O. What is that? I recognize it as a pattern. Let me go and discover what kinds of words are those? Well, they're always verbs. What kind of subject is involved? And then I start to discover that, the O often corresponds with a personal pronoun.
Yeah.
So I really like it in terms of letting the students become more independent learners. And Gerald, what you said, we teach, we teach the grammar, but are they actually learning the grammar, or are they thinking about their coffee break while we're telling them the rules? Guided discovery is actually something that I like to say, it's monitorable. You can see them discovering it.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about discovering rules in self-study, because I did quite a lot of that myself, also with French and Italian, and using texts.
Wow.
And the first, I suppose the first rule of engagement when it comes to guided discovery is you need to choose a topic that's going to be worth all the effort. So we need to eliminate boring texts or texts that we think were not going to work with students. We need to find something that really turns them on. In my case, it was cars, music, and travel.
Right, right. So and because Missy talked about teacher talk time, and there's this concept. I've heard a lot of teachers say, well, we have a student-centered class because we talk less. So it's automatically somehow assumed that just because you have a less teacher talk time, it's a student-centered class already. How true is that?
I think that's very true in that what you're actually encouraging in line with a lot of modern methodologies is collaboration and cooperation, and the idea that students are not working alone, not like Missy and me in our endeavors, but actually discovering the rules as a team or as pairs or threes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really useful thing to remember, that you are setting them up for time together. Again, the teacher is monitoring this process. And you know what? If it doesn't work, the teacher will take over and feed in some basics if they're needed. Okay, let's be real. But the idea is a good one. And I think the only other thing I want to say is, in order for guided discovery to work, you need rules. So if you've got something for some reason that doesn't have a lot of rules, or the rules are really, really random, then that's not going to work. You need something that has concrete rules that they can discover. So
Yeah.
as a methodology, I wouldn't want to claim that you can use it for every single thing you do in the classroom.
Right.
Yeah, I found often with, in terms of clarification, it might be a useful tool or technique for one of the three components of clarification. So it might be really good for form for this particular grammar point, or pronunciation, or for meaning, but often not all three. I mean, there's a few exceptions. I think the other thing that people tend to think, oh, but that doesn't work with lower level learners. And actually, it very much does. It can, no doubt. But I have encountered student resistance, and as well as teacher resistance to this, because as Gerald said, students just want to be told the rules. Now, you can tell them whether they are hearing them, two different things, but they're not really accustomed to having to do all this work themselves. So I do find particularly in some cultures that have a more traditional way of teaching, you kind of have to sell them on that a little bit, and it is challenging. And one of the reasons that guided discovery is often done in pairs or small group is because it is challenging, and it helps to be able to have one or two other people in your group that are kind of going through the process with you.
Yes, and the rewards that can be gained from success where you encounter it are considerable, and are a considerable marketing tool.
So that's a very good point, and a potential difficulty in applying guided discovery. But are there any other challenges or considerations when it comes to guided discovery?
Well, I think if the book doesn't provide the tasks for you, I do think you have to be a fairly experienced teacher to work them out for yourself, because it's quite tricky. There are a lot of pitfalls that you might fall into. But as Gerald said, there have to be consistent rules for whatever item. And I think it's important to notice that you've got to know the rules first before you can create a guided discovery for students to
Right.
discover.
Right.
Sometimes in the book, it just looks like, okay, here's some sentences and then a bunch of questions at the bottom. But actually, the questions have to be really well thought through before they can be effective.
And on that, because we are very AI driven at the moment and we like AI so much, do you think, how good is an idea that you go to ChatGPT and ask it to create you a guided discovery task?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't done that actually, but as Gerald was saying, I have, I imagine most people have by this point, used ChatGPT to generate texts, interesting topics, and then asking it to embed whatever your target language is. I haven't actually asked it to make a guided discovery task, but I'll do that after we hang up here.
I think it's only a matter of time. If it doesn't already have the capability of doing that, it will be in a very short space of time. As
But
far as I can work out, it's not yet quite there. There is some confusion.
yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly what I was going to point out, that yes, maybe you can go to AI and ask it to create you a guided discovery task, but like Missy said earlier, you need to know the rules. So for the teacher, the first thing is you need to do your homework and you need to do some DIY. So do it yourself and discover the rules yourself. Do it, know the rules, research it so that you know everything inside out, so that when ChatGPT or Gemini, whoever provides you with a guided discovery task, you are capable of identifying any issues if there are any, which probably there are going to be. But yeah, so you can only identify it if you see it. And then there's this other thing about, I think, not giving the task to the students until you've done it yourself.
Oh my goodness, I can't. Hareem, it's so important. And I would say do it yourself a couple of times and perhaps get a colleague or victim who's not familiar with it to do it, because oftentimes we are in the middle of it. We don't see where it might be for someone who hasn't seen it. But I think that before you go into the classroom with it, that is extremely important. And you were saying, you know, giving teachers this task of trying to make a guided discovery task. It is true. It's going to, it takes time, but if you put in the time before your lesson, you'll just be monitoring during the lesson. In addition, you should always, I would say, I only create guided discovery tasks for a language point that I'm going to use many, many, many times.
Right.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you get a payback for the time you put in.
Right, right. And so, talking about that, how do you think we can utilize technology to support guided discovery? Because a lot of us are doing online learning and online teaching these days. So, what works there? How does it work? Does it work?
Yes, I think it works. I think it works well. I think it works just as well as a face-to-face class in that the preparation work goes in. It's the same amount of preparation. You provide them with these models, sample sentences or a block of text generated or real, from which they can then analyze in breakout rooms with conclusions in open class, and gradually working your way through, at least, as Missy said, not necessarily all three, meaning, form, and pronunciation. Although there are some areas that lend themselves really well to all three, you might find there are limitations to that. And creating some tasks that are then done, it's perfectly workable online, to be honest.
Okay.
And Harima, I understood your question to be in terms of formulating guided discovery tasks, or
Well,
was it?
no, working out with the students, because we can, if we formulate guided discovery tasks, I think we can use them online and face to face. But because there's a lot of monitoring involved, how does that work online?
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully you are monitoring the breakout rooms in online lessons. And then, when you come back to the open classroom online, eliciting some of the examples that the students have come up with while in the room. But yeah.
So on
Monitoring
that,
is always a
however, because
challenge.
there are a lot of sorry, Gerald, but there are a lot of schools and institutes that are not really using Zoom for teaching, and they use Teams or Google Meet and so on. So, do we have a hack there?
I say Zoom because that's more often what I'm using,
Yeah.
but I think on any of these, any online teaching, if the question is, can you use guided discovery in online teaching? Most definitely, yes.
Right. Sorry, Gerald, you were saying something.
I'm not sure how important it was. Wait a minute. I've already forgotten it. I think one of the biggest challenges online is monitoring. You have this dreadful 4 or 5 second delay as you go from one breakout room to another to try and pick up as much as possible. I think that at the moment, anyway, that's definitely going to interrupt the monitoring process. One option is to have them working in larger groups, so there are fewer, if you like, changes that need to be made. And also getting them to do stuff in open class with you just listening in, as you would be in a real class. Might work. There are ways of doing things, and then we twist and we mangle them to suit the moment.
I like what you said, that 4 or 5 seconds when you're monitoring, it seems like a day and a half. Visually, I imagine during that time, as I'm waiting to get into the next room, that I'm walking very slowly down the hallway to another room, and I'm just like, get there, I want to get there. Another thing that's helpful though is having the breakout rooms, they have a whiteboard, and having them work out things on the whiteboard that they can then bring into the open classroom. So then you have a look at it together as a group, confirm that what's there is correct, or make adjustments as needed. But I think having your guided discovery task accessible on a whiteboard where everybody can look at it when they return from the breakout rooms would really help with that.
And
I think
maybe
one thing we can add to the whole picture is that once you've guided them, then you need to engage in that wonderful process of practice, where they actually put it into some kind of practical use, at least what they've learned. So, and that requires another round of monitoring.
And
Yes.
I believe if you use something like Google Docs and there are multiple documents and each group has one, so you can monitor them simultaneously at the same time. So everybody's working on different documents. So you see those documents,
Very
right?
good point. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
So earlier, I think one of you said that it works with all different proficiency levels. So it does work with lower levels. But that leads to another question. Does it also work with different age groups? So does it work with, let's say, young learners and then, moving up?
I had an interesting experience where I was guided to discover that, yes, it does. This was a number of years ago, but I was observing I think, second or third grade classroom in Texas. It was a bilingual classroom, and in the student science book, they had this list of animals, and it was things like, bears eat fish, and horses eat hay, that sort of thing. So I noticed as I was looking down this list of very short sentences, animal eats, and then whatever gets eaten by this animal. And I noticed that in every single one of the animals, there's an S at the end of the word, right? Because it's plural, it's bears in general. And so that's the kind of thing where you might say to the students, everyone circle the S at the end of the first word, and they circle, circle, circle. And then you might ask the question, is this one bear or many bears? Okay, so many bears. So, so we use S to show that there is, and in that case, I would have a multiple choice. We use S to show that there is one or more than one, and then the student circles more than one. So in that really simple sentence, and in some ways, I could argue that it's actually easier at the lower level because the text that students are reading as a young learner in a foreign language are very simple. And so the patterns tend to show up really frequently. So your eye goes quickly to things that look the same in many of the sentences on the page there. So yes, I do think so.
I don't want to dabble too much with cliches, but it's the older people we want to worry about. The young people are natural born curiosity sponges. They will take your methodology and they will enjoy every moment, arguably. It's the older ones that are more of a problem because they're accustomed to, they have expectations and they have a familiarity with the way things are done, whether it's a good idea or not. And they will be the ones who, if they're it's going to be resistance, it will be from there, arguably. There you go. I end that argument.
Yes, Gerald, just to follow up, I know in teacher training, what you've just said does tend to be true. Teachers who have been teaching a long time, and that's particularly in a kind of traditional lecture mode or format, they just feel like, well, what am I doing? I'm not teaching, I'm not doing anything. And then if they work through a couple of examples on their own, I think that's really important if we're trying to get teachers to use this methodology, to let them do it several times so that they start to understand that, no, you're not doing anything just because you're not lecturing. In fact, monitoring is extremely important with guided discovery. And one thing I like to kind of point out to teachers and learners is you have to monitor, and of course you need to give feedback, but oftentimes the feedback can be, look at sentence number 3. What do you notice about it? Because theoretically, the answer is in the sample sentences that you've provided. So rather than saying, okay, well, here's the answer, I lead them back to the examples in the text. And I keep doing that until they start to see the pattern. And then, as you said, if they don't, and time is running short, then there's always the option to fall back on lecturing.
Absolutely, yeah. One thing that all teachers, including me, by the way, I'm no saint when it comes to teaching methodologies, and certainly haven't been. But we suffer from a sort of performance deficit with these new methodologies. Our role is much more passive. It's not just in guided discovery, but all sorts of new methods where students are empowered to run the show and to take control of their own learning and destiny and so on. And so our role is constantly being revised and revised downwards from our voices and egos to certainly a more important role, but one that is something that takes a period of adjustment, let's just say.
Yeah, well said. I've been training for a very long time, and so many people I know have been training for a very long time, and we're still, I know I am constantly, I come out of a session thinking, did I talk too much? Was there a word there? I could still doing that. So it's a process.
Yeah, because a lot of new teachers, they go in, and we see that a lot in, let's say, CELTA. They go in, they do a guided discovery, and they feel like there's something missing, and then they go back to the board and then teach everything there. So they're teaching twice, and then there's no time left for any practice at all.
Well,
absolutely, it's common, yeah.
So true.
That's a very common thing. So, So we're talking about monitoring and monitoring a lot and all of that. So while we are monitoring and students, let's say, are not understanding, what do we do? Like maybe there's this one group who's not getting it, and I feel like sometimes teachers get sucked up on one workstation and they're there forever, and then everybody's done or they think they're done, and then they're chatting, and then that teacher is just there, still there, trying to figure out how to get them to do the right thing and not telling them the answers. So what's the key?
I think the key is in the circling you talked about, both of you talked about in previous parts of our meeting, in that with the group that's not getting it, and given that your materials are workable, you can in their breakout rooms or at their desks and tables, you can maybe underline or point out an area of focus. If you want to continue with the guided discovery element, give a group more time to work things out, then you're going to need to add some prompts. Build some prompts into the agenda, basically.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Gerald. And I think sometimes I say, you're like a punching, you get in and get out. So this idea of, okay, look at sentences 2 and 3 again, and I'll be right back. And then I try and step away, give them a moment to once again look at the sample sentences. But you can usually sense when a group is becoming they reach a level of frustration. It goes beyond challenge to frustration. And I think at that point, it's a good idea to step in or just say, all right, just leave this and we'll come back to it as a group.
It's at that point, of course, that the skeptics are right. So we can't force guidance. If it's not working, we need to resort to other methods. And to notice that very quickly, then the frustration level before it gets out of hand, they need to intervene. Can I just say something from a previous point we made? And that is, I would hate to condemn teachers trying to explain stuff, because in moments like that, you need those skills. And you're going to need to find crisp and clear ways of clarifying the meaning and the form and the pronunciation.
Right.
I think for beginner teachers, the idea of guided discovery is a bit of a daunting thing, as is test teach, things that require confidence in your ability to manage and to deal with outcomes that are unpredictable. I think the only thing I want to add is that as part of learning to be a teacher, you need to have the opportunity to hear yourself explaining stuff. Okay, so wait a minute. So guided discovery to one side just for a second. You need to know how to explain stuff. And for new teachers, the only way to do that is to actually physically apply it in a classroom, and then gradually evolve into using it more selectively, such as in a guided discovery setup.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's very true. In fact, I don't think there are a few things more valuable than recording yourself teaching.
Oh, yeah.
Video, ideally, or at least audio. Amazing awareness being raised. You have, we have no idea what we say. And then you listen. Oh my goodness, what was all that? Really a good thing to do.
Yeah. I suppose we could apply that to this session.
It's all recorded, so anyone can at any time go back and listen to him or herself talk and say, okay, did I just say that? Okay.
Yeah.
So we were talking a lot about designing the tasks and how much scaffolding do you think is required for the tasks? Is it like one leads to the other concept, or like how much, what is the role of scaffolding in guided discovery tasks? Missy, you're mute.
Sorry, I was trying to keep the background noise low. I think it comes really post-task more than, the idea is that let's see what they can do on their own and then provide scaffolding if needed, rather than scaffolding up front. So that's one thing. To me, the scaffolding the teachers need scaffolding in order to implement this technique. I think they need support. They need, I like to just have like a list of, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the things to get you through the process. I think it's difficult. I love doing sessions on guided discovery because I think it's a little bit difficult to process the information and do that on your own. It's possible. You can read about it and try it, but I think very helpful to teachers to have a session or two with someone whose experience has done it to get them.
I can answer that. I think I can answer the scaffolding question with 4 or 5 words. First, and 4 or 5 words is a nice idea, but I will, of course, I have an inclination to elaborate. But first of all, you need a context. You set the scene just like any other lesson and make sure that your lesson topic is an interesting one that's going to engage them. Once you've got that going, you engage in the art of task setting with the aim to maximize collaboration from a clear set of instructions. Oh dear, I've gone beyond 5 words. Sorry about that. Then you're monitoring like crazy. And then the results of your monitoring lead to the final stage, which is consolidation in the sense of any errors, sorting out, or clarification that's needed. And then I suppose with any time remaining, and let's hope you do have some time remaining, practice, practice, practice.
Right.
That's a good point, Gerald, if I could just follow up, because we are talking about this, and this is a very, interesting technique to use. It can be very effective, all of those things, but it's not the goal. The goal of the lesson is for students to use the language. So just to keep things in perspective, this is one stage of a lesson. This is a technique to use during one stage, mostly. And then you have to get on to practice, which is, going to be the main aim of the lesson, that the students actually use the language in practice. I also just wanted to touch on something you said earlier, Hareem, about teachers. They will do guided discovery and then they'll just feel like they just didn't quite do the job. So then they go up to the board and they basically do the whole thing over again on the board. I get quite excited when I see teachers do this on CELTA courses, because the process has begun. When we speak in feedback and I ask the teacher, what was the aim of this guided discovery? And then what was the aim of your board work and your teacher clarification? They very quickly have the same answer, and they realize that they've just done the same thing twice. And I love when they have that realization, because I know in the next lesson it's going to look different. But it's rare that they go from just one thing to the other. There's this thing where they're still...
But a lot of times they feel like because guided discovery is a task, it's supposed to have feedback. So whatever I did on the board was really feedback to the task that they did. So, yeah.
Well, of course, there's different ways of doing feedback. Providing an answer key, providing confirmation. I saw your answers, they were correct. Oftentimes working in groups, we do have more of an opportunity to go around. And I like to say to the groups, when you all agree on the answer, let me know. And most of the time, if 3 or 4 people agree on the answer, it's probably correct. So then that kind of opens up the question of what is feedback and the different techniques you might use in feedback.
We can over-romanticize the topic of guided discovery in that we make this assumption that because we've chosen to do guided discovery, the students actually don't know the rules. And we're making an assumption sometimes that isn't justified. So on top of everything else that you're doing in your methodology, you're also playing around with the idea that, well, some students will know some of this stuff already and they can help. It's part of this collaboration, right? So it's not just going to be the teacher having the final word,
That's right.
but it's, yeah.
Right. And we've been talking about, because we have a lot of teachers from different subjects as well, and we've been talking a lot about how guided discovery works for language, but it's not just language. You can teach like literally anything, like Gerald said earlier, as long as you have rules. So if you're a mathematics teacher and you can use guided discovery to teach geometric properties or binomial theorem or something like that. And if you're, let's say, a science teacher, you can use guided discovery for exploring photosynthesis. Like, you give them plant and light and tools to measure oxygen levels, and then they work that out. So that too is guided discovery. It just doesn't have to be language. It can be history, where you're analyzing causes of historical events, or could be art where you're trying to understand the color theory and creating secondary and tertiary colors and all of that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just language. So as long as, again, I say it has rules, we can do guided discovery and have a really good student-centered class.
And
So
if it's chemistry, then very, very careful monitoring.
Kareem, I'd like to attend a lesson where you teach me anything about math in any technique. Yeah, that is true. I mean, it really is just this inductive and deductive reasoning. And 100 years ago, someone said to me, okay, this is inductive and this is deductive and this is the difference. And then you spend the rest of your life getting them confused. And that person was correct. But I do know that one of them has to do with this idea of discovering from a list, a list or a group of samples.
right.
And then you figure out a rule rather than here are the rules, now try to apply them. So which one is which?
Gerald?
I don't have much to add to that. I think that's marvelous.
Right, right. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And today, as we conclude our talk on guided discovery, we really, really hope that this session has provided you with some valuable insights into creating these engaging, student-centered, and learning experiences. If you are interested to deepen your understanding and master the art of crafting guided discovery, we invite you to enroll in our upcoming CELTA course, where we'll train you on designing guided discovery activities, enhancing classroom interaction, and with some really good practical teaching experience, not only online, but face-to-face. And you have the opportunity of having best of both worlds, because we're always confused. Okay, do I go for online because that's the future? Oh, but I feel more comfortable face to face. So what do I do? So get enrolled in our upcoming CELTA course, which is blended, and so you get to teach and experience teaching both online and face to face. You will see our the contact details, or just DM us and we're going to get back to you. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Missy, for taking the time out. And thank you, Gerald, for being there again. So
Thank you.
goodbye to the two amazing tutors. And yeah, thank you. Goodbye. And I
Bye.
hope to see you all on our Celtic course. Bye bye.